we'll hear all about it tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for us on Up Front tonight. Again, stand by for that special edition of Hardball.
And I'll be right after that. We'll continue the live coverage of Jesse Goes to Harvard, so it should be interesting. See you later.
Good night, everybody.
Brought to you in part by Toyota.
Do you need a new car? Do you need to see the ocean? Is watching a sunset absolutely necessary? Introducing the all-new, redesigned Avalon, the most spacious, most luxurious sedan we've ever created. Do you need a new car? Take away the $1,000 suit, the $200 tie, the cell phone glued to the head, and you end up with a simple little investment whiz named Helen.
When the CIO found himself face to face with a giant enterprise integration problem, supply chain management, back office systems ground to a halt. Until one day, when the successful IT professional was able to integrate their ERP, legacy, and packaged applications. And they all lived happily ever after on the mainframe, Unix, and NT.
The fairy tale has come true. Saga Vista is here.
Glacier drip. Bottled at the source.
You're not really buying this, are you? Get the filtering faucet that proves you're getting filtered water. Pure Touch, exclusively from Moen.
Buy 4 Michelin tires now and get a free emergency roadside kit. Play the Michelin Buy 4 and Score game and maybe win a Dodge Viper. Plus other great prizes. See your participating Michelin dealer by October 31st.
Menopause affects you in more ways than one. That's why new Caltrate Plus Soy does more. It has soy isoflavones to help ease the effects of menopause and the calcium you need to help fight menopausal bone loss. New Caltrate Plus Soy, the Caltrate for menopause.
I may look young, but I still suffer from hot flashes. I discovered a natural way to deal with it. New Healthy Woman from the makers of Monistat. Healthy Woman's a soy menopause supplement that helps relieve hot flashes in a natural way. New Healthy Woman.
From the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University with 800 students and our special guest, Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura. Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura here with our students at Harvard University. I'm Chris Matthews. Let's play hardball. Well, Governor, thank you. Thank you very much for coming here to Harvard. It's quite an occasion, and everybody's out for it. A lot of people wanted to come that couldn't get in. And I have to start the evening with a fascinating question, which is fascinating.
Before you do that, Chris, I just want to say, before you ask me a question, it sounds to me like I got a hometown crowd.
Well, after reading a couple of magazines this week, including Newsweek, I have to ask you, so what do you really think?
Well, I say what I think, and I'm not afraid to do so. I think one thing people need to remember, though, Chris, is that I do an average of probably 5 interviews a day, 5 days a week, and when you multiply that out to how many weeks of the year there are, I'll do over 1,000 interviews this year alone, and I probably get requests for anywhere from 15 to 20 a day. And so when you do that many interviews and you're under the old microscope that I'm under, it's going to be turbulent times, let's say rough seas certain times when you do those interviews.
A lot of exposure.
A lot of it.
I was asked recently if I would do a Playboy interview. Do you recommend that I do that?
I'd say do that before the fold-out.
I'm wearing makeup because I'm sure my face will turn red. And underneath all this, I'm now going to tell you what I promised you tonight before we get into gotcha journalism, which isn't the most popular form of journalism these days. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's the question that's at the bottom of so many of our shows. And I want you to take a lot of time if you want to. What kind of a country does Jesse Ventura want to live in?
I want to live in a country that supports all the amendments of our Constitution. I think they're very, very important, that we never lose sight of the fact that freedom of speech is so very important, and that, you know, it's there because it's not necessarily there to protect popular speech, but also unpopular speech, and that the exchange of ideas should never be lost. And I think that's very important, and I want to live in a country where young people, no matter where they come from, can get opportunity if given that we need to have the ability to give everyone a chance, no matter what your economic background is or whatever, wherever you come from, that you be given the opportunity to make the most of yourself that you can possibly do in your life. And I think that if we continue to have a country that goes on those principles, that we'll be in good shape.
You spoke of all the amendments to the Constitution. Oftentimes when you see a sort of a politically correct version of the Bill of Rights, it skips the second one, the right to bear arms. You feel that that's something that we ought to honor as well?
Absolutely. You know, I believe the Second Amendment is misinterpreted quite often. You always hear the case of, well, we allow you shotguns to go hunting. Well, when they wrote that, hunting was a given. If you didn't hunt or fish, you didn't eat. And so it wasn't written to protect the rights to go out and hunt. It was written to protect we, the citizenry, from an oppressive government. That if government ever became oppressive, that we would have the right to bear arms and the right to battle our government if it ever got to that point. And many people say to me, Chris, that, well, how could we do that? You know, when you look at our military might of our government and all that, how can the people simply having the right to bear arms accomplish that? And I would remind people that it wasn't too many years ago that we were involved in a conflict with farmers who raised rice for a living and weren't really military people, but yet they had a few arms amongst them, and they withstood the might of our powerful military and a lot of bombs that we dropped on them.
When you hear of situations and read about them in the papers that you aren't involved with, like Waco and Ruby Ridge, and places where people sort of hold up in a shack and they feel under assault for whatever ideological reason or religious reason or cult reason, if you will, where does your heart go in those situations? Do you have a heart for those people feeling that they're under assault by a strong government, or do you feel that they're just trouble?
Sometimes. I believe that when people get to the point where they would barricade themselves in a particular place, that obviously what they're believing in is very important to them, to put themselves in a position like that. And as you know, if we take, for example, Waco, I couldn't understand why we didn't simply wait them out.
Right.
They weren't going anywhere. We had them in circle.
Not rushed them the couple times we did.
Yeah.
Well, the first time we rushed them. The second time we had to go in because they'd already killed some people, right?
Well, you know, do I have to get in trouble again on
no,
that?
just...
I found that it seemed a bit revenge motivated in the end. By government.
Fear of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
That government took some losses, that there was a tragedy that happened, and that at that point even, why couldn't we have waited them out?
But in a case where a person operating with a badge and serving their country and they commit an act and they get shot at, is that really under the category of revenge?
Well,
objectively stated or not?
I don't know if it is, but if we go back to Waco again, let's remember another important aspect of the whole thing. There were a very lot of innocent little children that were in that building. And you can't hold those kids responsible for any of the acts that any of the adults may have done. And I think that nobody really took time to think about these little kids that were in there.
What is your gut sense of a community of religious people or non-religious people or just friends who use the word barricade, who join together in a commune and arm themselves to the hilt with lots of weaponry? Do you think there's a limit to how many? You say the First Amendment is something that you treasure, and a lot of people do. Is there a limit to it, to how much you can arm yourself? Second Amendment.
Is there a limit to it?
Like the freedom of speech is pretty much unlimited. You can say just about anything. I prove it every night on this, and you prove it quite often. But is the right to bear arms one of those?
I wouldn't know it.
One of those. Is that one of those elastic rights?
I thought when you got elected, you lost your First Amendment rights lately.
Well, there's a quote of the week. Take that, Time magazine. Do you think it's an elastic right that goes all the way? Like speech, you basically can say anything, and pornography cases come and go, but you basically have an awesome amount of freedom under the First Amendment. But what about the Second? Do you think there's a limit to bearing arms, a right to, the need for a militia being necessary, blah, blah, blah?
Well, to me, they already outlaw machine guns, and I always hate that when they say, oh, he was armed with an assault weapon. Well, that's the connotation right away. It's to assume that that's a machine gun. An assault weapon, a legal assault weapon, is a semi-automatic. Right. You can't shoot it any faster than you can shoot your dad's deer rifle. Right. And in fact, in most cases, the deer rifle is far more deadly because, number one, it shoots a larger round, and number two, it's usually equipped with a telescopic sight, right, where an assault weapon is not. And it shoots a smaller round. It's just that the assault weapon looks bad. Yeah. Well, but there's no difference between one or the other. So
you're basically a gun rights guy.
I'm basically a Second Amendment guy. Right. I mean, it's there, and I have the right. I'm a law-abiding citizen. My question, I guess the thing I would pose is that why should I be penalized for what criminals do?
Right. Well, let me ask you.
I haven't broken any laws. I have a big gun safe at home, Chris. I've never once walked in my house and heard them going off in there.
You are now not a guy who looks at the government as a citizen. You are of the government, in the government. You're there right now. What do your state police say when you talk like that, and your law enforcement officials? Do they like the sound of those words you just spoke? The guys who have to catch the bad guys who are armed.
I don't hear anything wrong with my troopers that I talk to about that because, again, we're talking about law-abiding as opposed to criminals. Yeah. And law-abiding people should not be penalized for what criminals do. And let's penalize the criminals.
Let me ask you before we get to questions. This is the John F. Kennedy School of Government here, and it's also the Institute of Politics, both named for our late president. A lot of people here are thinking about careers in politics, I guess, generally defined, maybe journalism, maybe public service, maybe whatever. Do you think that's a good idea? Kennedy thought so, but that was a much different era. Do you think it's still a good thing to commit your life to public service?
Yes. If you can maintain and not let the system corrupt you. I don't believe that any of our elected officials are necessarily bad people, and I'm speaking with a broad brush here. I think most elected people go in with an idea that they want to do good, that they come in with beliefs that they want to believe in, but I think our system today is
what happens?
What's
You've been in office almost a year. Do you sense that giant sucking sound of evil there that makes you into a government guy, a G-man? Do you feel you've metamorphosized like the Fly into some evil government type, a bureaucrat with a suit out to bother people? I mean, when does it happen? You are a governor of a state.
I know.
You're not sitting in the backseat complaining, Daddy, when are we going to get there? You're Daddy driving the car. You are the chief executive of that state. Yeah. Does it feel different, and do you like the feeling?
I love the feeling. I love what I'm doing. It's a challenge for me at this point in my life. There's nothing more I'd rather be doing. I wouldn't have attempted to become governor if I didn't want it. I think that getting back to your initial question, though, of when does it happen, I think it happens today when these junior elected officials, especially in the legislature. Let's remember, I'm kind of a horse of a different color because I got elected immediately to the executive branch, and you couldn't pay me enough money to go into the legislative branch.
Because no power.
not just that, I went there and listened one day for 5 minutes. I stood outside when our legislature was in operating, and it was like I walked back to my office going, thank goodness I'm in the executive branch. I think the transition's harder from the executive to legislative rather than vice versa. I think it's easier to go from legislative to executive than the other way.
Let's go. So you think the U.S. Congress is in the same boat, I guess, right?
I think it's worse.
Worse. Okay, let's go to the first question up top.
Hi, Governor Ventura. I'm one of your constituents.
From Minnesota?
I am.
Really, where?
A voter.
Rochester.
Rochester,
yes.
Okay.
And what I'm curious about is Minnesota has quite a rich tradition of producing great leaders like Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale. And I'm curious to find out, okay.
How about Gene McCarthy?
Exactly. Thank you. And I'm curious to see sort of how you envision your leadership style fitting into the Minnesota mold.
Well, I don't try to fit into any mold. I can only do it to the best of my ability, and the way I govern and the leadership that I try to show is that I realize that I'm like the captain of a ship, of a Navy ship. Well, the captain doesn't actually run the engines. The captain doesn't even actually steer the ship. The captain simply oversees all those functions, which for me is the 25 different departments that I have in government. I try to put in the most qualified people to head those departments, people that know more about that particular department than I do personally, and then I get out of their way. My idea is allow people to have the leeway to go in, operate their department, and let them do it to the best of their ability. If it's unsatisfactory, they'll hear from me.
Back in a minute with more of Jesse Ventura from Minnesota.
The deals, the gossip, the White House. He's conquered New York. Now, could the Donald become the president? Geraldo Rivera goes one-on-one with Donald Trump. Monday, October 18th on Rivera Live.
With technology unavailable in any other SUV, just how smooth is the ride of the new Land Rover? The new Land Rover. Technology you'll be comfortable with.
Your Land Rover retailer has something else you'll be comfortable with. Great lease rates on a Discovery.
To me and the R&D team at International Paper, looks are just as important as content. So when an ice cream carton maker came to us for help, we created a container that's strong enough to make it from the dairy to your home. And the printing surface makes the ice cream look as good as it tastes.
Now remember, Daddy, save room for dinner.
How can we help your product look better? International Paper. From innovation to results.
People, today's agenda, the information age.
What happened to the industrial age?
No more living in the past. Today, it's what you know that matters. Look, he's got half a good idea over there. She's got the other half.
We get the picture.
What are we supposed to do about it?
Make it simpler for people to exchange ideas.
Don't need a digital office.
With new software.
Hardware.
Relax. I've got us a partner down there.
But they only make...
Not anymore, they don't.
Oh.
Keep the conversation going. Share the knowledge. The Digital Document Company, Xerox.
This is Laura Patterson. She's saving a bundle on long-distance calls to Grandma using MCI 5 cents every day.
When Laura was born, I counted on Mom to talk me through everything.
She'd call 2, 3 times a day. How do I do this? How do I do that?
Mom was always calling me.
It was like we rediscovered each other. Then we got the phone bills.
No college tuition for you.
Now we use MCI 5 cents every day. It's brand new. Calls are just 5 cents a minute every evening and 5 cents a minute all weekend long. That's half the price of AT&T.
And that's good.
And you can get daytime calls the rest of the week for just 10 cents a minute.
Now we can call each other any day of the week without worrying about the cost. Whether it's just to shoot the breeze or for the really important stuff.
It's Grandma. Hi there.
MCI 5 cents every day. To sign up, call 1-800-947-5050.
Say hi, Grandma.
Ask about our great international rates, too.
soft with this strong man next to me, and I guess I'm intimidated, but I will overcome my temerity, fears. Look, when you walk by a church, Governor, and you have that moment where you look up at the place and you keep walking, what goes through your head?
That was a question?
That's it. Doesn't get any more profound than that one.
What goes through my head?
And heart. And gut.
Heart? I have nothing at all against religion, people's beliefs, and the freedom that we're allowed to practice them here in the United States of America. And what goes through my heart and thoughts are that it's a sanctuary, that if people desire or need it, it is there for them.
But
I don't always generally need it. And I have a great minister right now. When I met him, he sat down with me. He's very perceptive. And he sat down with me, and in 2 minutes he looked at me and he said, "You're going to come to church when you feel the need, aren't you?"
Really?
And I said, "Yeah."
Well,
and he said, "I'll accept that." And that's why he and I get along terrifically.
I understand it. They once said of John Glenn, the astronaut, that he felt no increase in blood pressure as the heat shield started to melt as he came back to Earth one time. Now, maybe you're like that. You're not a firebell religious person, but when you're in an airplane and the turbulence, no matter how many times you tell yourself the turbulence doesn't cause plane crashes, what's going through your head then? When you were a SEAL, you must have been through some amazingly scary moments with life and death, and you were afraid of losing your life. And what was your religious moments then, or didn't you have any?
My moments are, and I think one person told me it says that I believe in a higher power because I believe in fate. I believe that you're destined on one particular day you will leave this planet,
right,
and that nothing you can do, say, or anything else will change that. Right. And I say that because I've been involved in a few situations where I probably should have died, and I didn't. And I believe strongly that when that doesn't happen, that there's more out there for you. That
well, let's talk about ours. You just shifted from the first person to the second person pronoun. More out there for you.
I know this is Harvard, but don't confuse
me. No, I want to get to destiny, a rendezvous with destiny. This evening, to some extent, I think is, I want to ask you this. Do you think you have a destiny that is important to us all?
That's a loaded question out of you.
I loaded it up.
You loaded it up. I don't know.
Or are you just another name in the alphabet, just another name in the phone book? We won't be thinking about 3 years from now. You'll just be off into
I don't know. I think that things will happen one way or another that will be inevitable if something does happen.
But I feel... All right, I'm going to ask you this. I was going to save it to the end. My 17-year-old son, Michael, thinks you ought to be the next president. What do you think?
I think that I'm greatly flattered by Michael. Tell him that I greatly appreciate the honor that he would think of me in that light. But as I sit here in front of you right now, the bottom line is you have to want the job. I do not want the job. And I say...
Well, let me ask you a middle case, as they said in St. Thomas More, and Man for All Seasons. Better you than Buchanan?
Well, but better me than Bush or Gore?
No, Buchanan. Let's stop there. But you guys are the same party, it looks like.
No, we're
Would
not.
you like...
No,
well, he's joining you.
He hasn't yet.
Well, he's coming. We'll be back with more of Jesse Ventura and the talk of Pat Buchanan in a moment.
Took over the American road in the 90s, so what's the new generation SUV coming to America?
The new BMW 3 Series Coupe.
I'm serving a party of 20, whether this pain goes away or not. It's So I took Advil liquid gels. See, they're stronger and faster than extra-strength Tylenol on tough pain. It's the only pain reliever with liquid inside. Advil liquid gels. It's stronger and faster.
You look awful. Sinus pressure, huh? You know how Advil handles your tough pain fast? Well, Advil Cold and Sinus handles tough sinus pain fast. This is in this, plus a decongestant. That's why they call it Advil Cold and Sinus.
Technology you already have. CompuWare, people and software for e-commerce.
Recently, a study of 110,000 men and women conducted at Harvard University and published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that drinking a glass of orange juice every day may reduce the risk of stroke by 25%. Evidently, the word is out. 100% pure Florida orange juice. Drink a glass every day.
Rock Falls, Illinois. It's my town. Oh, there's Mike Downing. Watch, he'll wave with both hands. A lot of these folks, I'm their MetLife financial professional. We'll do 10% mutual funds, and the rest will go to annuities. MetLife and Farmers go way back. During the Depression, we got 7,000 farms up and working again. That's MetLife. John, I got a great job. I'm a part of these people's lives, and I don't have to sit behind a desk.
Jesse Ventura at Harvard. We have 800 people here. Let's get to the next question.
Governor, thanks for being here. I'm Kishan, and I'm a grad student here at the Kennedy School. And studying here, I used to wonder if a third-party candidate could ever win a major election. I wanted to say I'm proud of you for doing that, and proud of you for sticking by your comments of the last week. I'm a Hindu, and while I agree with you that I don't need to be in temple to be practicing my religion, I don't think that those people who do believe they have to do that are weak-minded. And I'm wondering, I don't think that you necessarily believe that either, but I'm wondering if you'd like to feel like you owe an explanation to those strong-minded people who do really believe in organized religion.
Right, and the point I was making, and if you read the entire answer, like my answer is, read the question and then read the whole answer, not just things pulled out or all of that. And what I was referring to was that there's not necessarily a bad connotation on being weak-minded. And if faith and... No, there is not. If faith and religion fulfill that void for you, then you obviously do need it.
But you said Hemingway, you dropped any interest in Hemingway as a writer because he was so weak-minded he committed suicide. You used that very phrase to diminish him. I read the whole interview.
Well, because to me, suicide and the other are apples and oranges to me. I personally have a hard time dealing with a person that would even attempt suicide, because I told the young people today when I spoke that if life is that bad at that point, it can only get better.
Yeah.
So call me the eternal optimist.
You said to read the whole answer to your question. You know, the Second Amendment to the Constitution includes more words than you've spoken. It said that there being a need for a strong militia. The right to bear arms shall not be denied. Why do you ignore that preamble to that right? Why do you ignore
the militia?
The militia part, which suggests...
How have I ignored it?
Because you said you said the right to bear arms is essential to a person to be able to take on their own government, not to be part of an organized militia.
But an organized militia can be a citizen militia. It doesn't say a militia doesn't necessarily mean the U.S. government's army.
You mean it can be a rump group like you have out in the West in Michigan and places like that? Are you supporting that kind of militia? You're here. I invited you. You're here. Do you support that kind of militia?
I would have to say, am I supporting that?
You know, irregulars.
I don't know what kind of militia they are.
A bunch of people that get together and wear uniforms on Saturdays because they're afraid the government's coming to get them in black helicopters. Are you with that movement?
As long as they're not harming anybody, if that's how they want to spend their Saturdays, that's their business.
Back with more of Jesse Ventura right after this.
This weekend, from headlines to punchlines, political satirists Mark Russell and Jim Morris. This weekend on Tim Russer. Brought to you in part by Payne Weber.
They think the market's going to go up 20% next year. What are the
tickets, folks? I'm out.
I keep reading about tax-efficient investing. Should I be doing that?
Let's see. Rates are falling, inflation's low, more stocks or more bonds.
Hey. Oh, man. This investment strategy's for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, Payne Weber.
One place on Earth where all these worlds collide. Introducing Salon.com, the 24/7 web network for news, entertainment, and ideas. Salon.com. BMW 3 Series Coupe.
When other kids were trading baseball cards, he was trading soybeans. He bought high tech when it was real low. His fish are named Dow and Jones. He has the investor instinct, and he trades on my track. He was frustrated with the delays in connecting with most online brokers. So he called the 800 number and installed the free software. Now he places orders when he wants. He's notified instantly of executions. When he logs on, he stays on. So when the market moves, he can place his trade. He rides the bull. He bets his cat. My track. Trade like a pro. Trade commission free your first week. Market volatility and trading volume may affect trade execution.
We're back with Governor Ventura. You know, this whole place, this whole part of the campus here is devoted to the memory of John F. Kennedy. And, of course, Jacqueline Kennedy came here to dedicate and played such a role. Her family, John Jr., of course, played such a role here for years to try to make this an emblematic, well, an active legacy of a man who obviously was a hero to so many of us. Let's talk about Vietnam, because the Reagan people, the conservatives, love to thrill themselves with the success of the Cold War, and they forget the Cold War wasn't all victories. There was some horror there for us as well as the other side. What do you think about Vietnam? You're this generation, my generation. You've been through it. You've lived through it. You fought with the SEALs. You knew a lot of guys who died over there and fought, and you felt it. What do you feel could have been done to prevent that war? Or could it not be prevented?
Oh, it certainly, I believe, could have been prevented, because as I look at it today in hindsight, many years down the line, it was a civil war. It was a war that took place that in a country, and really I think we got involved in it because of our allegiance, our old World War II allegiance with France. France was, if you go back prior to World War II, Vietnam was a colony of the French. When World War II came, the Japanese invaded, the French surrendered, and at that point the Vietnamese were actually our allies. When we had fighter pilots get shot down in those things, it was Vietnamese that would help them escape and all that. Well, then when World War II ended, the French came back in and wanted business as usual.
Right.
And by this point in time, the Vietnamese had seen them surrender to the Japanese, so they basically said, nah, we've had enough of this. I think we would like to self-govern ourselves. And I personally feel it was our allegiance that we felt we owed France from World War II, that we started then logistically supporting the French in their involvement.
Well, that was the NBA, and that was over with by 54. The Kennedy, we had 900 or so advisors there under Ike, and then when Kennedy was shot, we had about 18,000 by then. It seems like even very smart men like Ike, who was a very smart guy and a reasonable guy, he looks better over time, and Jack Kennedy was equally aware of what you said about the French and how they had put out so many troops there to try to save that colony. He'd visited there as a young man. They knew all that you know now, but they couldn't seem to avoid the politics of not being, quote, in a position of losing Vietnam like Truman lost China. How in the world do we avoid these things in the future? We're getting into wars every couple months now.
Let's remember something, though, that in many cases, a situation like that's good for the economy. You have to support the war machine, which creates jobs.
Well, who wanted to do that in 1961 and 62 and 63 when Kennedy was president?
I think our country did in a lot of ways.
Well, Kennedy did tremendous increases in our strategic weaponry. He was a hawk.
Well, but look at how when the Vietnam War escalated, all the money spent, the armament, all the jobs we had to create to build all the things that you go over there and fight a war with.
But the escalation didn't occur until 65. Kennedy was dead in 63.
You got to remember something, Chris. In 1963, I was only 12.
Yeah.
12 or 13.
You said in that Playboy interview, and I'm only going to quote you once, and this isn't gotcha journalism, I was profoundly struck by it. You said that we killed Kennedy.
I say...
You went on and said the military-industrial complex, a term used by Ike in 60.
And the reason I say that is when I used to wrestle, I used to fly a tremendous amount. I have 1.3 million miles with Northwest Airlines alone on my frequent flyer card. And so when you fly, you read. I read. I'm not a great sleeper on a plane. I read. It became an obsession with me to read about President Kennedy and all the different scenarios of what people think happened. And as a former military, I cannot buy the fact personally that Oswald acted alone.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. How do you think of...
And I say that because he was required to get 3 shots off in less than 6 seconds or 7 seconds, whatever it was. He misses with the first, which would be the easiest shot.
Sure.
And then the third shot's the most deadly. There were 50 eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen smoke and gunfire from the grassy knoll. There isn't one eyewitness that can support the Warren Commission.
I agree with you. All those questions are great questions, and everybody cares about, and everybody agrees that the Warren Commission was a rush job. Johnson wanted to shut the thing up. But you know, the whole problem with the larger conspiracy questions is that you have to ask yourself, how did Oswald get that position along the motorcade route at the Texas Book Depository all those weeks before the assassination, unless there was a very large conspiracy involving the people who put the motorcade route right past where he had the line of fire? This is what's so serious about it, so damning about these conspiracy theories. It isn't 1 or 2 guys that were his fellow gunmen. If you make that accusation that this was a conspiracy, you have to argue that we put the motorcade right under his line of sight and gave him that free set of shots, so he would be the fall guy. And that means you got to bring in the Secret Service, you got to bring in the Dallas Police. How far do you go with this?
Well, let me give you one example. When my mother passed away, for whatever reason, my son and I were going through the big trunk she had, and she had all the Minneapolis papers the weekend of the Kennedy assassination. She kept them in plastic. My son and I started reading them. Monday morning's Minneapolis paper, which meant the story had to go out early evening Sunday night.
Right.
In those days, to be in the Monday morning paper, you've had the murder of the president on Friday at noon, the murder of his alleged assassin Sunday at noon, right? Minneapolis's Monday morning had a sub-headline, Dallas police declare case closed.
So you believe they were part of this?
Well, excuse me. How do they haven't even investigated anything. Yeah. They haven't talked to one witness. And my son, who was about 15 or 16 at the time, looked at me and says, Dad, they spend more time on a domestic.
But this is Johnny
How
Cochran
how
stuff.
could they
you
declare
say the police
case
didn't do a good
closed?
job, therefore
I'm not
police killed the
saying
guy.
the police
That's what we did in L.A. And you trashed that defense by Cochran, those guys, by saying just because you proved the police didn't do their job does not prove the police killed the guy. You were saying because the Dallas police didn't do their job or try to clean up a job as fast as they could because they wanted it off the headlines that they killed Kennedy.
No, I'm not.
What are you saying?
I'm not saying they killed. I'm saying how could they possibly, we as a country, declare the case closed Sunday afternoon?
Your point being?
My point being, they haven't even talked to a witness. They haven't even gone out.
What would be their motive?
Haven't even done an investigation.
But you said in your Playboy interview that we killed Kennedy, the military-industrial complex killed Kennedy.
Said
You're
that's
now incriminating the Dallas police. How many other people are involved in this?
I don't know.
Well, let me go on with this because Oliver Stone.
Let me go with
how far you go with this.
I'm going to fire another one at you.
I'm asking you the question. No, I want to ask you this.
I'm a talk show host too. How is it then that Senator Yarborough, who is riding about 3 cars behind, testified that very day that he could smell the pungent odor of gunpowder as he drifting across
then you are
now, if the shots took place in a room 5 floors up behind them, why would you smell that down on the ground?
Good question. And your conclusion is, having paid attention, you said done a lot of reading on it. Where do you get to on this?
Who knows? Who knows? Because anyone,
you go as far as Oliver Stone?
Anyone who questions the Warren
I'm not
Commission
questioning. I'm asking you
is
the question.
told that they're crazy. You're a kook.
I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm letting you talk.
You have nothing.
But let me ask you this. Oliver Stone said LBJ had a hand in this. He was in cahoots with the conspirators. Do you buy that?
No. Oliver Stone took all the mud and threw it up on the wall.
To see what stuck.
And
Nixon
he basically said to you, here's all the scenarios. You decide.
Is that what he said?
That's what I believe he said.
I believe he made a conclusion. That Nixon was involved, that Johnson was involved, and that J. Edgar Hoover knocked off Bob Kennedy.
No, I think that he threw it all up there basically to open up the minds of all these young people.
Well, as long as the minds stay
open. All
these
young people.
We'll be right back with more Hardball and Jesse Ventura.
You may not accept it.
When do you ever get more than you pay for? Right now. We're Quick & Riley, the discount broker that gives you more for less. We put a premium on service at a low price on commissions. In fact, our personal brokers can help you in a number of ways. Stop by any of our 117 investor centers. Place trades 24 hours a day, by phone or on the internet. Get the research you need free, plus really low commissions. Up to 73% less than Merrill Lynch and Solomon Smith Barney. Up to 33% less than Schwab and Fidelity. So call 1-800-999-2865 to get more for less at Quick & Riley. And when you open your account, we'll give you 3 free months of Standard & Poor's newsletter, The Outlook. Just another way you get much more for less at Quick & Riley. Call 1-800-999-2865 today.
If you were a new luxury car, how would you stand apart from the rest? Would you have the most powerful V6 in your class? Or the largest interior? Maybe you'd offer amenities you couldn't find anywhere else. Imagine how special you'd be if you could claim all of them. Presenting the all-new Infiniti i30. It's all the best thinking. Tired of constant demands for new technology? Fortunately, there's CDW, the industry's leading direct solutions provider, where a dedicated account manager uses the buying power of a Fortune 1000 company to custom configure solutions to your needs. CDW makes technology easy, so you're free to enjoy the rest of your day. CDW, computing solutions built for business.
Cheeseburger sounds good, huh?
Dad, with your heartburn?
No problem. They have Tums.
Tums? With that new prescription you're taking? Did you talk to your doctor?
What?
Look, read the warning.
You're kidding. Tums Tums?
Yeah, it says if you're taking a prescription, don't take Tums without checking with your doctor.
Really?
Here, Dad, try my Pepsid AC. There's no prescription warning. One Pepsid AC now, we won't even get heartburn.
Are you going to buy those, hon?
But I will have a cheeseburger.
Same here.
Start living heartburn-free with Pepsid AC.
About at the Kennedy Institute of Politics and the Kennedy School of Government to talk about what we were just talking about.
Let me hit you with this last one, Chris. Let's say it's true that Oswald did it, like they all told us he did, right? He did it. This little disgruntled Marine private who got obsessed with Marxism and decided to kill the President of the United States. Well, if that be the case, why would all evidence have to be put in the National Archives till the year 2029 under the premise of national security? Yeah. How could a little Marine private affect our national security in any way, shape, or form?
Let me ask you a question then, and that's a great one. It's one thing to question the police work. It's one thing to question the bureaucratic instincts of some stupid bureaucrats who love to lock up everything because it might embarrass somebody. I agree. There's all kinds of strange motives here. Let's open up. Let's release the tapes, all right? But you went further in that interview, and you said that the reason Kennedy was killed is because he wanted to end the Vietnam War, and the military-industrial complex wanted to stop him from ending the war by rubbing him out. You said that. And before you said right before... Well, go ahead. Follow up.
That's one scenario that I could see happening.
Is it yours?
I could see that being a reality.
You believe it?
I don't know what to believe.
Well, here's a question I have for you. And
what I don't believe is the Warren Commission.
No, I agree. You're safe on that one. Let me just ask you a question, because this is what Stone plays around with, too.
I was only 12 or 13 years old.
Stone tries to portray Jack Kennedy, we remember, as a tough leader and a brilliant politician and a cold warrior and a good man, flaws like all of us. He had him as some sort of flower child that wanted to end all wars and put flowers at the end of rifle butts and all that nonsense. Let me tell you, here's Jack Kennedy's speech 2 hours before he's killed. You can get this from the presidential documents. It's not hard to dig up. He's bragging to a Texas audience about the fact that he's increased the Green Berets by 600% since he's taken off. Green Berets in Vietnam. He says without the United States, South Vietnam would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the CETO Alliance would collapse overnight. Right before he's dead, he's saying we got to stay in Vietnam. And you say he was going to pull out. What evidence do you have, and where do you get it from?
Probably, I don't recall right now. I've read some.
Well, I've listened to all the tapes right up to date. I just heard him again today. Jack Kennedy had a division in his administration between those who thought we should have knocked off CM and those who said we should have stuck with him. The fact is there was nobody in his administration who wanted to pull out, and you can't find Schlesinger. Go ask Schlesinger. Go ask Sorensen. Go ask McNamara. Go ask Russ. None of those guys can remember. Bobby Kennedy couldn't remember his brother ever saying we're pulling out of Vietnam. But you know it. How do you know this stuff?
All I can say to you, Chris, is that I read and
What?
I read a tremendous amount of books on it, and I look at facts of how things happened that day, and I don't have the answers as to who, when, where, and how. Again, I was only 12 or 13 years old. I don't have those answers, but I'll repeat again, I don't believe the Warren Commission.
That's safe. Let's go to the next question here, Tom.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Governor. I'm Nick Rosan of Hardball College, and I want to turn you from Vietnam War to a more recent military conflict, and I'm interested in what do you think about American involvement in Kosovo crisis, and more general, your position about the current administration's foreign policy doctrine of a humanitarian bombing.
Well, I'm involved very strongly in governing the state of Minnesota, which does not necessarily put me in line with federal policy or get me to focus on federal policy. I'm concerned over the fact that we seem to be the policemen of the world, but again, if we're the power, maybe that's the evolution of what's going on. If we're the last major superpower of the world, maybe we are the policemen of the world. I don't know. That's a determination that federal officials elected at federal government will have to make, and we certainly as citizens, if we disagree with them, then we shouldn't put them in office if we believe that our policy should be different.
Next question.
Hi, Governor. My name is Bola Kabbalah.
Mr. Matthews was asking about militias in Wisconsin, and you said as long as they're not harming anyone. And I just wanted to ask you how far you'd be willing to take that libertarian premise on issues like drugs. You said pot, but would law-abiding citizens be able to consume crack and amphetamines in the privacy of their own home if Jesse Ventura were president?
The president doesn't pass one law. And you all should know that here. The legislature passes laws. The president either signs them or vetoes them, but he certainly carries policy. My view is this, and the point I make, I think that the war on drugs is a miserable failure. And I think that we are channeling millions and millions of dollars in a belief that I have, and that is this: you cannot legislate stupidity. People are going to do stupid things, and when we start going down a very slippery slope, when we try to legislate every stupid thing that someone may do out there.
We're coming back with our last segment with Jesse Ventura right after this. You're watching Hardball on CNBC.
The deals, the gossip, the White House. He's conquered New York. Now could the Donald become the president? Geraldo Rivera goes one-on-one with Donald Trump. Monday, October 18th on Rivera Live.
I won't assume all index fund investing is the same.
It's not. Consider the Fidelity 4-in-1 Index Fund. It invests in a combination of 4 stock and bond index funds, providing greater diversification than investing in a single index fund.
Look to the innovative 4-in-1 Index Fund and other low-cost Fidelity Index funds to help you invest responsibly. To get a fact kit, call 1-800-FIDELITY or visit fidelity.com.
You're looking at someone who just bought a home with no down payment. How? He called ditech.com and borrowed 125% of the purchase price. With your good credit, you too can finance up to $500,000 with no down payment. Use the extra cash to pay closing costs, pay off bills, or buy new furniture. Buy a home of your own with no down payment. Call ditech.com at 1-800-71-FIXED for the 125 Green Loan today.
Tired of having to wait for the great taste of filtered water? Now there's a better way. Introducing the Pure Touch faucet with a filter right inside. Pure Touch, exclusively from Moen.
As we age, our joints can make simple actions more difficult. But now you can help support the flexibility of your joints with pain-free glucosamine and chondroitin. Pain-free helps rebuild and protect joint cartilage. Move better, feel better with pain-free from Schiff.
When other kids were trading baseball cards, he was trading soybeans. He bought high tech when it was real low. His fish are named Dow and Jones. He has the investor instinct, and he trades on my track. He was frustrated with the delays in connecting with most online brokers. So he called the 800 number and installed the free software. Now he places orders when he wants. He's notified instantly of executions. When he logs on, he stays on. So when the market moves, he can place his trade. He rides the bull. He pets his cat. My track. Trade like a pro. Trade commission free your first week. Market volatility and trading volume may affect trade execution.
Of the Kennedy Institute of Politics, Senator Alan Simpson, who used to be really a funny guy when he was a senator. I guess you're serious now that you're a professor, huh?
No, I tell you, I haven't changed either. But it's great to have you here. But I'd like to ask the good governor, he's been here on this campus all day, and you're probably like me, you come out of Cody, Wyoming, and think, I'm going to Harvard. Boy, this is really something. And in 4 years, it's been the most unique experience for Ann and for me. What is your your impression of Harvard that you had formed before and how you feel now as you leave after a day.
My impression is that it's you can tell just the atmosphere around here that it is the remarkable learning institution that it is, and you can see a group of faculty as well as administrators and everyone who are very committed to what they do, and you can see students who are very committed to being students, which is a great thing to see.
Next.
My name is Esther Chang. I'm a recent graduate of Harvard College. My question to you is, what made you decide to run on the Reform Party ticket? That is, what would you tell the growing number of Americans today that are dissatisfied with the two-party system?
Well, I didn't really decide to run with them. When I ran for mayor of Brooklyn Park, it was a nonpartisan election, and the two major parties combined to support the 22-year incumbent. And they wrote a letter to every citizen of Brooklyn Park calling me the most dangerous man in the city. And they said, and all I did was pay taxes and send my kids to school, public school there. And then the thing that bothered me was after I won 65% to 35%, and they said they were dropping party differences to support the incumbent candidate. After I won in a landslide victory, then they both came independently courting me, which showed me, first of all, that both parties have no credibility. It showed me, second of all, that the end justifies the means. They don't care what you stand for as long as you win. And so I then I told them, no, I don't need you. I don't want you. You didn't, get lost. And then I started seeing a fellow named Dean Barkley, who was running for Congress and running for the Senate in Minnesota with what then with us was the Independence Party, and which then became the Reform Party later on. And I started looking into the Reform Party and felt that it was something that went with my beliefs a lot more than the other two mainstream
Let me ask you, Governor, if lightning strikes and it's the year 2005 and it's inaugural day, January 20th, the year 2005, and you've just defeated incumbent President George W. Bush and Democratic challenger Hillary Clinton, and you are sitting at the desk, you got the new desk, you got your pencils there, you got your phone there, what?
What?
What do you do? What do you want to do if you got that job in that moment? What would you do with it?
I think I'd call you up, Chris, and bring you in.
Bring me in?
For an interview.
For an interview. I think you're going to make me my chief of staff.
No, first of all, I think that it would be the same situation that I faced in Minnesota. Having a Reform Party candidate had never won a major office before, so there was no one we could go to. And so I was so focused on winning the election, because why not? If you don't win the election, there's no reason to focus on anything past it. You're going back to work at what you used to do. Well, after we won November 3rd, we all met in my kitchen, the people close to me, the next day, and we all looked around at each other and said, what the hell do we do now?
Yeah. And then
we just started moving forward, and a few people with some experience started taking charge, and they put me in touch with former Congressman Tim Penny, who put me in touch with my current Chief of Staff, Stephen Bosacker. And Stephen Bosacker came in and took charge of my staff during transition with the full knowledge that he would be my Chief of Staff later. And the thing that sold me on him was he was actively involved in John Anderson's presidential campaign. I needed a third-party mentality.
I only got a minute here, Governor. I've got to ask you a question. Cable television is a crazy thing. You never know who's watching. But out there's probably a couple thousand kids watching because you're on, not because I'm one. And they don't like politics. They know you from wrestling. They know you from a career. And they're watching. They may be from terrible neighborhoods. They may be noise down the hall. Their parents may be not that good parents. And they're watching right now. This kid, he's 13 or 14 years old. And he's interested in you. What do you got to say to him?
I would say to that kid to believe in himself. And because ultimately that's who he's going to answer to in the end is himself. And I would tell him to be focused and to believe that this still is truly the United States of America, where anything can happen if you have that belief. And I would tell him that not to ever quit, that sure, you're going to have setbacks, sure, you're not going to win everything, but ultimately never quit in your desire to be as great as you can possibly be and to try each and everything you possibly can in this life, because I'm a firm believer that until they can prove it otherwise, you only go around once.
Okay, that was your last word. Thank you. Thank you, Alex Richard. Thank you, Harvard. Thank you, Kennedy School of Government. Thank you, Jesse Ventura, the governor of Minnesota. You're watching Hardball Rivera Live is next.
Brought to you in part.
Pedro Duque, for instance, is his first time in space, and he needs to get adjusted, but he still has a big job to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I would think, let's take a look at the president, by the way. He is at the Launch Control Center, taking a walk through. He was on the roof watching the launch from a little better perch than we have right now. Let's take a look at those pictures if we can. And he expressed some jitters before the actual, I guess he's in a car on his way there. Is that, that appears to be a shot from the blimp. In any case, the space adaptation sickness, this is a recurring problem. I don't want to dwell on this because I know you guys don't like to talk about it too much, but the fact of the matter is, when you start looking at people, there's the president along with the First Lady, and in the foreground, Daniel Golden, the NASA administrator. We can't hear what they're saying, but clearly offering some congratulations to the entire launch control team. Anyway, back to space sickness. This has been studied for many years now.
And shuttle 7 to 9 times a year. They do it safe, and they do it on time, except when planes get in our way. Great space team of America. I want to introduce to you a man who cares about our space program. I want to introduce to you the first president of the United States who had the courage to come down here to NASA Kennedy and watch a shuttle launch in real time. It's all right. I want to introduce to you a man who cares about America's space program, who cares about America's future. And when we had those battles up in Washington, he made sure we're going to build a space station, launch it on November 20th, December 3rd, and 7 launches a year for the next 5 years.
Copy that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I have so many things to thank you for today. But among other things, I have to thank you for making the First Lady very happy, because about a year ago she said, you know, we need to make a list of all the things we want to do before we leave office. And I said, okay, what's on your list? She said, you have to take me to a space launch. I want to go. We didn't have the courage to come here. We had confidence in you and pride in America and a conviction that our space program is good for the United States and good for the world. And I want to thank you today because you made all of us terribly proud. Let me also say that because of the intense interest in this, in the media and among ordinary citizens, the American people have had a unique opportunity today to see what you do, not just at the moment of launch, but in the weeks and months and years that preceded all the hard work and all the preparation. And now they will learn over the next few days all the things that are being done in space that advance not only our mission in space, but the quality of our life here on Earth. And all of that, too, has been made possible. The last thing I'd like to say is it has been immensely impressive and important to me to have the chance to work with NASA over the last 6 years and see the revolution which has been undertaken so that now you can, on virtually the same budget you had 6 years ago, do 8 launches a year instead of 2 and continue to explore the outer frontiers of space. I thank you for all of that. America is very, very proud of you today. Thank you, and God bless you.
The first president of the United States to witness a space shuttle launch, only the second president of the United States to be here for an actual launch. John Kennedy never got an opportunity. I'm sure he would have liked to have come and seen one.
I'm sure he would have.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, some final thoughts. Bernard?
Well, I guess I would like everybody to know that, we're here for John Glenn, but they've got a long road ahead of them the next 9 days. They'll be working in the Spacehab module that was commercially developed, of course, as part of NASA's new initiative to get commercial involvement. 83 experiments. That's going to be a tough mission, but they're up to it.
And it's down to the 5-minute increments. Dave, any closing comments?
Yes, this is a typical multinational scientific mission, typical of the kinds of things we'll be doing on the International Space Station that we begin launching in about 3 weeks. One element from Russia, another from America 2 weeks later. It's going to be an amazing 5 years building this station and operating it for 20 years as we conduct research in orbit.
Gentlemen, thank you all. Walter, it was a distinct pleasure and an honor.
I think we can say one more time that this broadcast was dedicated to John Holloman, who was a space reporter until he died, unfortunately, in an accident a few weeks ago. I think, Miles, you did a great job. John would be proud of you.
I think he was watching somewhere. I hope he enjoyed the show. Holy cow, what a sight, he probably was saying. Thanks very much to all of you for being with us, and we will continue our coverage all throughout the mission. As always, stay with CNN.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
Houston Discovery, roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
It's always critical, though. Let's keep an eye on all this.
What's going on right now?
1. Booster ignition.
One minute and 50 seconds into the flight. Discovery now at an altitude of 25 miles, traveling at a speed of 2,900 miles an hour.
The best time to give your Ford, Mercury, or Lincoln the care it deserves is now. Quality Care Fall Value Days at participating Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers with great prices on all kinds of services. Now get brake service for $95 or less installed from people who know your vehicle best and have the right parts. Get a new Motorcraft Tested Tough battery for $59.95 or less. Going on now during Fall Value Days.
At your service, Quality Care. I hope I see you
you there.
A stranger from the next world.
Do I blend in?
Has come to visit ours.
You want me to be your guide? I wish to see the world.
On November 13th, Universal Pictures invites you to experience life through the eyes of Joe Black.
I have this weak feeling in my knees.
Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins.
I don't want to leave.
Meet Joe Black.
I want to be with you, Joe.
A Martin Brest film rated PG-13. Starts November 13th.
And hello from CNN Center Atlanta on an exciting day. I'm Natalie Allen.
I'm Lou Waters. Other news in the world today, the Palestinian Authority a short while ago placed the leader of the Islamic militant group Hamas, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, under house arrest. Hamas had claimed responsibility for today's car bomb attack in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat promised to crack down on militants during his summit with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. In today's attack, the bomber and an Israeli soldier died. 3 Israelis and 4 Palestinians were also injured. CNN's Walter Rogers has the story from Jerusalem.
Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu visiting a soldier wounded in a suicide bomb attack. Last week's summit in the United States was supposed to reduce chances of this happening.
If the Y agreement is to have any meaning, the Palestinian Authority must crack down in the most forceful way, according to the standards established at Y. This is the test now of the agreement.
A Palestinian tried to ram his explosive-packed car into this school bus that carried 40 children. I thought it was an exercise, this boy said, when he heard the explosion. An Israeli army jeep escorting the bus blocked the suicide bomber's car. The Islamic militant and a soldier were killed. Several others were wounded. A man claiming to represent Hamas called Israel radio and took responsibility. Later, Palestinian sources say Hamas leader Sheikh Ahmed Yassin was under house arrest. Palestinian President Arafat condemned the attack, which brought both Arafat and Mr. Netanyahu in for new criticism.
Mr. Netanyahu has to realize that up until now he's been able to claim that this was an agreement that he inherited. But the Y memorandums are an agreement that he signed.
Before this bombing, Prime Minister Netanyahu got a boost in the polls from the Y summit. Now he finds himself in the shoes of the man he defeated, a peacemaker under fire from the Israeli right, which does not like this peace process. Walter Rogers, CNN, Jerusalem.
People in Mexico are breathing a sigh of relief today. Most of their country was spared by Hurricane Mitch. And as CNN's Harris Whitbeck reports, for many people who stood in the storm's path, it's time to get back to their everyday concerns.
Sunny skies were the backdrop for merchants reopening their stalls in Chetumal Central Market. At a juice stand, the radio was tuned in to the governor's latest message. He said Hurricane Mitch no longer seems to pose a threat. That was the news people wanted to hear.
People are calm and they don't think their hurricane will get here.
People began to put their lives back in order. First priority to find fresh food. People lined up for the main staple in the Mexican diet, the tortilla. Those who spent Wednesday night in shelters prepared to head to their homes. The authorities lifted the emergency measures that had been put in place 2 days before, but insisted things could yet change and people should keep informed.
Despite the governor's warnings, people here seem to feel that Hurricane Mitch's threat is no longer imminent and are breathing easier. Further south, however, in places where Mitch's presence has already been felt, it is quite a different story.
In Honduras, dozens of people on outer islands and along the coast were killed. Roads were cut off by mudslides and buildings destroyed. Officials say the country's economy has been severely affected. The banana crop, Honduras' main export, is concentrated along the coast that was pounded by Mitch. Meanwhile, in Cancun, Mexico, another cash crop, tourism, was also affected because so many visitors fled.
But with reports that Mitch is no longer headed to the area, Mexicans are hopeful that the long, tense days of waiting for the storm are over. Harris Whitbeck, CNN, Chetumal, Mexico.
A former high school student who admitted strangling her newborn infant, then returning to the dance at her senior prom, was sentenced to prison today. Melissa Drexler drew 15 years for aggravated manslaughter in a plea bargain agreement. She had admitted to giving birth in a bathroom and wrapping the baby in garbage bags, which she tossed into the bathroom trash bin. Drexler made this very brief statement in court today in Freehold, New Jersey.
Yes, I was just tell you I'm really truly sorry for what I've done. Okay?
Drexler once faced a murder charge, and accepting the aggravated manslaughter plea, she conceded the baby was born alive and admitted she lied when she said she had not known she was pregnant. Byron Looper, charged with killing Tennessee State Senator Tommy Burks, is scheduled to be arraigned this afternoon. Looper was running against Burks in the general election November 3rd. A witness says he saw Looper drive up to Burks' truck and says the man, he later said he heard a shot. Burks' widow Charlotte now is a candidate to take the seat of her late husband. Republican and Democratic Party officials are backing her.
More trouble today for the family of Louise Woodward. She's the British nanny convicted last year of killing a baby in her care in Massachusetts. American and British authorities are looking at discrepancies of more than $300,000 from Woodward's defense fund, and her parents, Susan and Gary Woodward, are under investigation. Some of the bills the Woodwards have submitted for reimbursement are being disputed. Investigators also are looking at potentially illegal money transfers and money never deposited into the defense fund. House Democrats are accusing independent counsel Ken Starr of extravagant spending during his 4-year probe of President Clinton. The claim is based on documents detailing how Starr has spent the $40 million his investigation has cost. Starr hired private investigators for more than $700,000, despite having use of dozens of agents from the FBI. A personal parking space has cost Starr $370 a month, and apartments for 8 of his staff have come to a monthly cost of $19,000. The latter two expenses appear to be at the upper end of normal Washington living expenses and probably are well within government limits. A Starr spokesman says the office is following government guidelines.
Back in a moment.
Coming up next on CNN, the interactive town meeting, CNN Talk Back Live. Join in the conversation next.
Okay, class, and why don't you tell me what you want to be when you grow up? Zach?
I'd like to be a firefighter.
Sophia?
A doctor.
And Barry and Elliot?
I don't know, but I really like a more comfortable place to sit. Yeah, like a chair that reclines like this. Or a love seat. And these mattresses could use some more support.
The Great Mattress Depression and the rise of the reclining chair were both instrumental in
better. Oh, yeah, much better.
The laser challenge begins.
Forget the old boundaries. Firestorm lasts 1,000 feet. Ultra-wide hits everyone in a 50-foot radius. Laser Challenge Firestorm and Ultra-wide sold separately. Batteries not included.
Are you up to the challenge?
Too much for term life insurance? Now, premiums for $250,000 coverage are as low as $18 a month. Through Matrix Direct Insurance Services, you could save up to 75%, maybe even more, on term life insurance from one of the country's top insurers, Transamerica. Now, by calling Matrix Direct, a 35-year-old man could get $250,000 term life coverage for less than $18 a month. And that low premium is guaranteed for 10 years. Also, by calling Matrix Direct, a 42-year-old man could get $100,000 term life coverage for less than $14 a month. Call Matrix Direct. Talk with a licensed insurance professional for a fast, free quote right over the phone. You'll see why thousands have called Matrix Direct to save on quality term life insurance for men and women. Call 1-800-543-3602. Matrix Direct. 1-800-543-3602.
Go inside politics now for a full hour. Weekdays 5 Eastern on CNN.
Attention skiers, Colorado is getting an early taste of winter. Even the four-wheel drive vehicles were struggling in this Rocky Mountain snowstorm west of Denver today. Up to 5 inches of snow fell on the region yesterday, and an approaching storm could dump another 9 to 12 inches in the higher elevations. 16 hours of negotiations have failed to produce an NBA deal. Fans outside the New York talks were not pleased. Owners now have canceled all pro basketball games through November. Both owners and players say a wide gap still separates the two sides. Players already have lost about $200 million in salary. No new talks are scheduled, but both sides have agreed to speak later today by telephone.
It's official. Olympic gymnast Dominique Moceanu is legally an adult. The ruling made yesterday in a Texas courtroom after Moceanu's parents gave up their challenge to her bid for independence. The high school senior has her own apartment, and today she'll meet with an accountant. Moceanu is demanding to know how her parents spent money from her trust fund. Just in time for Halloween, there appears to be an explanation for the alleged haunting of a church in Deland, France, which we told you about. Alarmed by reports of candlesticks flying through the air and statues crashing to the ground, church officials sent for an exorcist, and now the local mayor has admitted it was all a hoax to win publicity for his town. The mayor's lawyer calls it a practical joke that went out of control, but police are not laughing. Good one, Mayor.
Glad we got that cleared up, huh?
I am. Well, that's a brief look at the other news of the day. Lou and I are back in about 1 hour with more news. I'm Natalie Allen.
I'm Lou Waters. Talkback Live is next.
This is CNN.
I've always wanted John to be able to go back as long as I've known he's wanted to. But if I'd had my druthers, he'd be home in Ohio running for re-election right now. And he said he was too old to serve another term in the Senate, but he wasn't too old to go into space. And I think the American people should know that the decision to send him was made strictly by the book. I had no role in it.
We have a go for engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
Discovery, roll program.
He's an original American space hero. John Glenn made history more than 35 years ago as the first American in orbit. Today, he's making history again at age 77 as the oldest person to travel into space. Talk to astronaut Buzz Aldrin and Miles O'Brien live from the Kennedy Space Center and meet some of the people who know John Glenn best. Get your space questions ready and stand by to talk back. Hello and welcome to Talk Back Live, CNN's interactive talk show. I'm Roger Cossack, in today for Bobby Batista. Well, it's been nearly an hour now since John Glenn rocketed into space for the second time, more than 3 decades since his first space odyssey. How has the space program changed over the years? Is the preparation process different for astronauts now? Are we more interested in space? Let's ask CNN correspondent Miles O'Brien, who is hosting our space coverage. Miles, how did the liftoff go? It looked perfect over here.
I don't think you could have scripted anything better than this one, Roger. It was really amazing. The weather was fantastic. There were a few problems with aircraft located in the general area of the Kennedy Space Center. But other than that, there was one minor indication of a valve leak, which turned out to be not much of anything. That's about as close to a flawless launch of a vehicle with 2 million distinct parts as you could possibly imagine. It's truly a spectacular sight, and no matter what you may say about the validity of the space program, the manned space program, the validity of John Glenn going in space, you can't help but be taken away and a bit awestruck by it all.
Miles, I will admit right now that I'm not very objective about this. I am very excited and thrilled to see this happen. Tell me some of your feelings. You've been there all day. You've been intimately involved with all this. How did you feel when you saw this happen?
It was such a thrill to be able to watch it and to be able to sit beside Walter Cronkite, the person who I first became accustomed and got to know the space program through. Watching him in the mid-'60s through the Gemini and Apollo programs, it was a thrill on many accounts for me. And we as journalists tend to focus on the issue of whether it was a stunt or whether it was about science. It's at these moments when I think everybody's a sort of a cheerleader for the success, at least of the flight.
All right, let's have some comments from our audience. Sam from Georgia, what do you have to say?
Well, one of the things that I liked about this one was it took me back to when he first went up in space, and I remember the race between the United States and the Russians and the national pride that we took in that, and it kind of brings that back. It's not as it's gotten ho-hum in the last several years because it's so routine, but boy, back then it was not routine.
Miles, you're way too young to remember that space race at that time, but I must tell you that I do remember it, and Sam brings up a good point. This does fill us with national pride, and it does sort of turn our head once again to the space to the space program.
Well, Roger, the bottom line is NASA is a victim of its own success. They've done a very good job over the years. There have been some notable exceptions, of course, but they've done a very good job at making spaceflight, which is a pretty extraordinary thing, look routine. We don't go and cover airplanes taking off at the average metropolitan airport because that's routine. And the same has really gone for many of the 91 space shuttle missions, now 92 in orbit. The fact remains that it's not a great story because NASA is so good at it. It's a routine scientific mission at many times, and in a way, NASA would like us to pay more attention to it, but they've done their best to make it not that exciting a story.
How do you like that? NASA's a victim of their own success. Miles, stay right there. We're going to go to NASA at Houston, go to CNN's Tony Clark. Tony, how's it going in Houston at the NASA Space Center?
Well, you know, Roger, I was watching the mission control. I was in a berth just above mission control here at Johnson Space Center when the launch took off, and there are about 7 or 8 monitors in there, and no one was looking at the monitors that were showing the launch itself. Everyone was glued to their computer screen, watching the numbers come in, making sure that everything was going just as expected, because, you know, I think it's about 30 seconds after liftoff, control switches from Florida here to the Johnson Space Center, and they will keep control here throughout the flight of Discovery.
All right, Tony, when you say they keep control, what exactly, and I suppose without being too technical, what exactly do they do and how do they do it?
Well, you know, Miles mentioned how many parts there are to the shuttle, and there are so many functions that have to be monitored. The astronauts on the shuttle simply can't keep up with everything, and so what Mission Control is able to do is monitor the activities that need to be done on the shuttle, monitor the health of the shuttle, and also monitor the astronauts themselves. One of the interesting things is that the Capcom, the capsule communicator in this case, Susan Still, is a former astronaut, and she is an astronaut, and she is the communicator between Mission Control and the shuttle and Mission Control, and so she brings the astronauts' perspective to the operation of the shuttle through Mission Control.
Tony, you've been inside that NASA Space Center and where they're controlling it. Describe it for us. What does it look like in there? Does it look like outer space itself?
Well, no. The Mission Control itself is really relatively new. This particular one, it was only started operation 3 years ago, and one of the things that they do in there is they have put in kind of off-the-shelf